Marianne Lefebvre, assistant professor in economics at Angers University, and I'm presenting today a joint work with a colleague from Pesticide, where Caroline Gutleben is also working, and other colleagues from my university. So we've ran a survey in 2017, quite a big one. And our question was, to what extent French people accept the transition to pesticide-free urban green spaces that was compulsory from 2017, at least in the parks and gardens that we've investigated. And we wanted to compare the opinions of the citizens, but also the managers in charge of these areas and the local politicians. So next, please. So what is at stake here is that, as Caroline just mentioned, some technical solutions are available to manage these areas without pesticides, but they induce changes for the users and the workers. And there are received opinions from those that take the decisions, so mostly the local politicians and the managers, on whether these changes are acceptable by the citizens. So the next slide, please. Our objective was to challenge these received opinions with regard to what changes are acceptable by the users, and to identify how the transition to pesticide-free can be implemented. So the question here was not whether banning pesticide would be beneficial for the population, because that was decided that it would be the case anyway in France, but how to implement this transition so that it increases the welfare, the well-being for the majority of the citizens. So how did we do that? Next slide, please. So the first question was, what are the likely consequences of the adaptation of these areas to allow their management without pesticides? So to do that, we did interviews with mostly with managers in charge of these areas. And then we moved to the next question, which is, which one of these consequences are the most valued and disliked by the citizens? And the third question is, do we observe any divergence across stakeholders? Do they agree on what is important for them? So going into the details, you can see on the small pictures, what are these consequences? What are these aspects of the urban green spaces that are most likely to be impacted if we move to a management without pesticides? So the first one you may think about is the visual aspect, so more wild, more natural aspect. We could think also about having more fauna, but this may also impact the recreational opportunities that could be improved if there's some investment to improve them, or deteriorated. For example, if the grass is higher, then it may not be as so easy to run. For the kids to play and so on. Also, we've seen in France that there were a lot of information campaign in the parks and training for the workers, because this is quite a big change for the workers and their working condition can be impacted. So we were interested to know whether the citizens are aware of that, and if they care about the working conditions of the workers, they may see when they visit these parks and gardens, and also some financial impacts. So to do that, next one, please. Yes. So we used a method. I'm not going into the details, but basically it's a survey, and people have to choose which park they would prefer, and we define the different parks. So here, for example, you have a park that is named A1 versus another park with other characteristics. So both are managed without pesticides, and you have to decide which one you would prefer, which transition you would prefer. And we asked you this question several times, and we can infer from that what do you prefer. And if you had to pay, because for the management of these parks, we used the public budget. So if we have to use part of the public budget, the city budget for that, what do you prefer? So we've interviewed, so it was in the winter 2017. So in theory, the pesticide ban was effective everywhere in France, but we know that it was not the case in all the cities. Also, some cities had implemented the ban a long time before the law. So that was quite interesting, this heterogeneity. And we surveyed on one hand 500 citizens representative for the French population, but also another sample where we had citizens again, but also managers and local politicians. So going to the results, so what we observed, so next slide, please. What we observe, so from citizen point of view, the most important thing is first, do not deteriorate the recreational opportunities and do not deteriorate the working conditions of the workers. So it seems that citizens do care about the workers because usually they work during the opening hours of the park, so their work is quite visible. And that's an issue we've discussed quite a lot, that when they were using pesticides, the spraying, well, of course, they were usually not done during the opening hours, but even with their specific equipment, protection equipment, this was, they always had a lot of questions by the users of the visitors of the park. So we've seen that French people do care about the working conditions, and it's important not to deteriorate them. We've seen that the recreational opportunities is very important. So if in these transitions to pesticide-free management, the city councils can find a way to improve these opportunities, this is something that is very valued by the population. The fact that more fauna can be observed is also something very important. That people do not dislike the natural wild aspects. They are more in favor of that, more than a control aspect. And also, this was quite surprising for us, they do not value that much the presence of information explaining what is the pesticide ban and how do we manage without pesticides. So this could be because maybe they already had access to this information in France, but also we think that's a received opinion from the manager that it's very important to inform the population, but maybe the population is more interested in having some recreational opportunities than knowing how the park is managed. So we should be cautious to think whether it's so important to invest part of the budget in this information campaign. So then what we've done here, next slide please, is that we've compared different scenarios. So imagine a scenario where you organize the transition, so we call it apparently as before. So basically it consists in keeping unchanged the recreational opportunities, the visual aspects and the fauna abundance as before the pesticide ban, but this necessarily comes at the cost of deteriorated working conditions because workers will have to work much more. For example, if you think for weeding, it takes much more time, and the alternative equipments can be heavy to carry and so on. So what we estimate here is that for this scenario to receive the support of the majority of the population, we would need to reduce the budget allocated to urban green space by 11 percentage points. So it means that people would agree for this scenario, but only if it costs less, which is unlikely to happen because weeding without pesticide takes more time, and the labor cost is one of the major financial aspects of these parks and gardens management. So an alternative scenario would be the laissez-faire. So basically is to limit the maintenance burden in the absence of pesticides. So with more wide-looking area, most likely with deteriorated recreational opportunities. So fauna could be happy, so major increase in fauna abundance. But we inform the population because it's quite a big change in the visual aspects of this area. In that case, we could imagine that the working condition could be improved because, well, we don't add so much manual or thermic or whatever other weeding techniques to the workers. So in that case, we observe that, well, basically half of the population would be happy with this scenario, but half not. The scenario that was more convincing for the population, it's the new opportunity one. So the idea here is that—
Marianne, can we wrap it up, please?
Yeah. So this scenario, why is it? It makes people more happy. So basically, they would be willing to pay more to have more of the city budget dedicated to urban green space because the recreational opportunities are improved, and this is very important for the people. So the last point is, do we have a divergence in the preferences of the different population, the different stakeholders? So they basically agree on many dimensions. They all agree on the importance of not deteriorating the recreational opportunities and the working conditions. But what is interesting here is that it's more important for the citizens, the wild aspect on the presence of fauna than for the others. So it's a received opinion that citizens won't accept more wild aspects. It's on the contrary, they accept it more than the politicians and the managers. And also the importance of information. This is not so important for the citizens, but it's very important for the managers because we believe that they want to show that they do efforts to manage without pesticides, and they want to show and communicate it to the public. So that's human. I think that's always nice to share what you do with the others, but it's also costly. So maybe that's not so important according to research to invest in this information campaign. Okay, so if you want more information on this study, so maybe you can directly move to the last slide. We have an article already published in French, and 2 will be forthcoming soon in English.